Hey guys, welcome to Tuesday, April 14th. I hope you enjoyed Chapter 3. If you have yet to read it, go back and read it before you watch this video so that you have a deeper understanding, because obviously, as you've seen in my other videos, when we go over the chapter in this PowerPoint here, we hit on the basic points of it and I go in a little more detail, but some of the extra pages, the ones that have little articles, that will be part of your quiz questions. We don't usually go over those, so make sure you are actually reading those. So let's get into Chapter 3. It's Communication and Identity, Creating and Presenting the Self. Sorry guys, let me get more comfortable. And I found this chapter incredibly interesting. I feel like it went on a very psychological level, which I love. And it seems to me it's finally getting into even more theory when it comes to communication. So communication in the self. There's two main concepts that are used throughout the chapter, self-concept and self-esteem. Self-concept is used more than self-esteem, I believe, or as I recall, but they're both really important. So self-concept is the relatively stable set of perceptions you hold of yourself. So when I was asking you those questions at the beginning of the chapter to define yourself, this is how you define yourself personally. And that self-concept can also come from outside sources, but mostly it's what you use to describe yourself, how you perceive yourself. And then self-esteem, evaluations of your own self-worth. This is definitely usually reflected from what others think of you. So it takes those self-concept points, what you believe of yourself, and then it's like, okay, so if I describe myself as ambitious, and then self-esteem would be taking that ambitious trait and being like, oh, I think that's a really great trait, and it rises my self-esteem. It makes me more confident. While I could also turn that as a negative thing, like, oh, I'm so ambitious and that ruins my friendships because I'm all about me, and I kick people away, kick people down just so I can get a step up. Not true, but that's an example of self-concept perceptions I hold or you hold about yourself, and then the self-esteem based on those concepts. So communication and the self, biology and social roots of the self. So it's talking about how your personality can come from biological reasons, but a lot of times it comes from social reasons. So how you're raised and then who you're socializing with. So your personality comes a lot from the environment you're in, but it can also be a little bit of biological as well. Though that is still kind of a more tested theory and not fully proved, they do see some biological comparisons to how your personality is. But mostly, yeah, it's usually how you're raised and who you're raised with and who you become friends with. That shapes your personality. But also the events that happen to you in your life usually is what shaped your personality as well. But usually personality is it's a pretty basic thing. Your personality solidifies as you get older, but it doesn't really change that much unless something super dramatic happens in your life that really does a 180 on your personality, which can sometimes happen, but your base level personality usually stays pretty much the same throughout your entire life. So socialization and self-concept, reflected appraisal and social comparison. So reflected appraisal is a lot of times what people say about you is what you think of yourself, or how they react to what you do. So you can pretty much say a lot of times, for instance, if you think of yourself as funny, you say, well, I know I'm funny because, and I describe myself as funny because every time I tell a joke, people laugh. So that is reflected appraisal. I'm funny because people laugh at the jokes I tell them. A comedian pretty much can tell if they're a good comedian if people are laughing at their jokes. And then social comparison. Sorry, I want to bring up my notes for the book so that I give you, I touch on everything. So social comparison, that also brings in reference groups. So social comparison is valuing ourselves in terms of how we compare with other people. So this is where a lot of times media comes in. So you're watching reality TV shows and you're watching or you're reading magazines and you're seeing these people who are pretty much photoshopped and you're like, oh, they're so much more beautiful than I am. They're perfect. Look at them. Or you're watching reality shows and you're saying, wow, these people are nuts. I'm so glad I am not like them. Or more personal reality shows like My 600-Pound Life, where it follows a person through their weight loss journey from being like 600 plus pounds to losing weight. And you're like, and sometimes people are totally guilty, me included, of watching these shows and like, you know what? I thought my life was bad. Their life is so much worse than mine. So yeah, social comparison, and you can make yourself feel superior to these people or inferior, like with magazines, all those Photoshop pictures, or all those reality shows with all the celebrities who are living this rich, perfect life, quote unquote perfect. And then reference groups. Groups are just those groups in which we compare ourselves to. So how the way we shape how we view ourselves is based on those reference groups. Sorry if you hear my dog barking in the background. Either a leaf flew by or the mailman is here. Who knows? Or a dog is walking by. She thinks she's our perfect guard dog. Okay, so communication in the self. So characteristics of the self-concept. The self-concept is subjective, often distorted positively or negatively due to obsolete information, distorted feedback, perfectionism, and social expectations. So, let's get into how they're distorted. So obsolete information, the effects of past failures or successes don't equal the similar future results. So, positive or negative, you can say, oh, I am so bad at math because you failed your last math exam. But just because you failed your last math exam doesn't mean you're bad at math. That means that maybe you're struggling with a certain section of that math, but that doesn't determine your future results on future math exams or your actual mathematical intelligence. And also, positively, you can say, hey, I'm really good at soccer because I got so many goals the last game, but then the next game, that doesn't mean, that could have been luck, Yeah, it could be talent, but it could be luck, too. And the other team could have been just, like, really having an off day, and, it doesn't determine future results. And then distorted feedback. Distorted feedback, a lot of times, it's the feedback that you get from other people. So, and it can also be positive or negative. So, positive, you could have a really overinflated ego because your parents worship you and say, oh, you're the perfect child, you're so great. And you get that overinflated ego like, well, my parents have always told me I'm the best of the best. Of course I'm going to think that. I don't know if I've told you guys how much I love Harry Potter. So I'm going to use that as a reference. If you guys have seen the movies or read the books, Draco Malfoy is a perfect example of distorted feedback, having an overinflated ego because his parents raised him as this perfect, or seemingly perfect, only child, and he can do no wrong, and so he has this overinflated ego thinking he's perfect. And obviously that goes away eventually, but that's a good example. And then also distorted feedback can come from the opposite of that. Negative feedback from friends, family members saying, oh, you're worthless, you're no good at this, and just pretty much emotional abuse. And bullies, negative feedback from bullies can make you think you're worthless when really you're not. And then let's get to perfectionism, which I brought up before, how there's no perfectionism. The belief that others are perfect, especially celebrities that we see on TV or in magazines and they're photoshopped and they seem like they're living their perfect lives when the truth is there's no such thing as perfect. No such thing as perfect, and comparing ourselves to that is just going to lead to a lot of heartbreak and a lot of just distorted positive or negative self-concept. And then social expectations. This gets into the fact that a lot of times society tells us not to not to tell when good things happen to us or when we make really big accomplishments, because we might seem like we're bragging or being, just egotistical, when really that's not the case. If it's only egotistical or bragging if you're kind of doing these actions and gloating about this when you really didn't accomplish it. A lot of times if you're lying or you're over exaggerating your accomplishments. So if you're telling the actual truth, social expectations are still saying us, oh, don't do that, you're going to be called a braggart, so you don't. However, they do say, hey, I'm okay with you mentioning all your shortcomings, so we tell about our shortcomings, and we talk freely about that because you don't get a lot of negative feedback from that, and but you lessen doing or playing out your accomplishments or even downplaying your accomplishments, so that you're not called a braggart or egotistical. So that can also make you feel less important or less confident about yourself because you start believing that you didn't accomplish a lot of good things because you have to downplay it for everybody else. And then internet-mediated reflected appraisal. This is back to the concept from the last chapter where we post the things that we want people to think of us, and we also get confidence from the things that people say to us. So we post a picture and we think, oh, of course we have pretty eyes. Everybody says every time we post a selfie that we have pretty eyes. So that gives back that reflected appraisal. So communication and the characteristics of the self-concept. So the self-concept resists change. That's called cognitive conservatism, the tendency to seek and attend to information that conforms to an existing self-concept. So if you've always thought that you were really unattractive because people said that, like bullies when you were younger, and maybe your family members, if you have really cruel family members when you were younger, and so you keep that self-concept because, oh, you used to maybe be a little overweight. Not saying overweight people are unattractive. I'm just giving a good example, guys. And you had braces and whatnot. And then you grow up and suddenly people are telling you you're pretty and you're attractive. Just like that example that we saw in the book. And you're like, no, I'm not. I'm not attractive at all, because you keep with that cognitive conservatism that you want to stick with the self-concept that already exists in you. You want to conform to that, and you don't. As human beings, we're good at change and we're good at adaptation for the most part, but at the same time, we don't like change, and change scares us. So a lot of time our brain is like, change? No, don't change. Stay safe. You know how to be this kind of person. You know how to be smart. You know how to be pretty. You know how to be ugly. You know how to be shy. So stay there. Act like that. Even if your personality has evolved from that. And then embracing a more positive self-image. I want you guys to really take a look at this, because I know high school is hard. I know middle school before that is even harder. Embracing a more positive self-image. Here's some steps that they give you. I'm so glad that a textbook is giving you guys advice for having a positive self-image. That is amazing. So, have realistic perceptions. Don't perceive everybody as perfect and comparing yourself. Have realistic expectations. Don't set your goals so high or expect something from yourself that is too high, and you have to take steps. Not saying you can't get to this impossible high, but take steps to get there. Don't just expect yourself, like, I'm going to have my PhD by